From the What's in the Name series that I developed, Richland Township. Richland Township is, of course, here in Madison County. And that is a plat map of Richland Township done in 1876, pretty well settled by that time. Of our 14 townships, Richland is the 8th in the order of formation and was quite larger when originally formed by the county commissioners on the 4th day of March in the year 1834. Quite literally, the commissioners selected the name Richland because of the fertility of the soil. Madison County's rich forest soil, when stripped of the trees, was gaining notoriety everywhere beyond its borders for its fertility, especially in the flat, well-watered till plain. The township's original boundaries included all of its current 28.5 square miles, plus all of Monroe Township, except for 3 square miles in the northwestern part, the eastern half of Lafayette Township, and a strip 1/2 mile wide across the northern part of Union Township. All of those sections were stripped away from Richland Township when those townships were created. There's 2 creeks that water the township. Killbuck Creek is the principal waterway, entering from neighboring Delaware County near the northeast corner and traversing in a southwesterly direction, exiting near the township's southwest corner before entering White River. In the southwestern corner, Little Killbuck Creek is joined by its smaller namesake, Little Killbuck Creek, whose origin is also in Delaware County. Both creeks are named for the Delaware Indian chief Killbuck, whose known existence in Madison County spans at least 20 years, from 1801 to 1821. I first find a mention of Killbuck in the Moravian Missionary Diary. The missionaries met Killbuck as a young man and liked him very much. He was very helpful to them. In fact, he is the Native American who was dispatched from Goshen, Ohio, to come here and notify the Indian tribes here that the missionaries were on their way. He left there in November, Goshen, Ohio, and he came over here and was back in mid-January, and all on foot. All on foot. He communicated to the Native Americans that the missionaries they had requested were coming to get ready for them. He then was friendly with the missionaries. I find him in our history up until 1815. He leaves the area as a result of of 1813. He leaves the area in 1813 as a result of the Treaty of St. Mary's, that the tribes here had to relinquish their land for a while General William Henry Harrison came in and wiped out the dissident Indians that were in the area. When that was done, he invited the Delaware back, and Killbuck came back with him, and he established a village over near Chesterfield with another Delaware chief by the name of White Eyes. And the 2 of them lived there until 1821, when they then had to leave. And the next thing I find Killbuck, he's in Missouri in the late 1820s, and after that I find no record of him. Here is Killbuck Creek as it makes its way into Richland Township, and Little Killbuck Creek, same. They join right down here in the southwestern corner of the township. Killbuck Creek. You'd recognize it anywhere, wouldn't you? William Curtis is acknowledged as the first to settle in Richland Township when he built a log cabin in 1830 near Killbuck Creek, someplace in the southwest corner. History books don't locate it for us exactly, just somewhere in that corner. It was about that same time that the Shelbyville and Fort Wayne State Road was laid out, with a portion of it passing through Richland Township. That road today is known as the Alexandria Pike, short for the Anderson and Alexandria Turnpike. It was the principal north-south highway through the township for 100 years until Indiana State Road 9 was constructed in the 1830s. And when Indiana State Road 9 was constructed, that kind of took up traffic all off of the old state road and the turnpike. I show you the Alexandria Pike here today. Of course, it ends at just short of, I think, 600, isn't it? Where it ends at, right at 600. That was, as I told you, that was the Fort Wayne-Shelbyville State Road. It connected Shelbyville to Fort Wayne, passed through downtown Anderson, would have crossed the river just north of the bridge. There was a ford there, crossed the river there, and then gone up Alexandria Pike on its way north, eventually to Fort Wayne. The presence of Killbuck Creek and the Old State Road were contributing factors that encouraged early settlement in the township. Before the close of 1831, and only a year after the state road was opened, several pioneers had settled within convenient distances, and the more enterprising of them introduced some modern innovations, capitalizing on the nearby water supply. Water-powered mills. Madison County in its history has been dotted with mills. Of course, the first settlement was at Pendleton, and along the falls there, taking advantage of the falls and Fall Creek, were a number of mills. We find several mills along White River in our early times. But one of the most, outside of Pendleton, one of the most heavily concentrated area of mills was Richland Township because of Killbuck Creek. In 1833, a sawmill was built by Matthew Fenimore on Killbuck Creek near the future township's southwest corner. A dam across the creek supplied the necessary water power to operate the mill. Would have been in this area here. Sadly, we don't get locations on these mills. Our history books don't tell us exact locations other than the person who owned it, and we assume that the person who owned the mill owned the land also. But these are 1876 maps, well past those times, and the names have changed. I don't know if you've ever seen a sawmill. Very simple. A log was fed in here. The water that came in here from the source turned the water wheel, which in turn drove the shaft that the saw operated on. So it was no mean trick just to have the operator just feed. Now that was for raw lumber. That was for raw lumber. But that's how it worked. The mill race brought the water in. The tail race took the water back to its source. Utilizing the same dam, two men, the original settler William Curtis and James Barnes, built a grist mill. You ever see a grist mill run? Again, the water source. Here would be, you had three types of wheels. You had an overshot, which brought the water in on top of the wheel. You had a mid-shot, which brought it in here, and then you had an undershot, which brought it in here. This happens, again, that would be the location of the wheel in relationship to the water that's coming to it, either top, middle, or bottom. Drove a shaft, which turned the gears. Your stones, the bottom stones was stationary. The runner stone was on top, and it was turned by this shaft that was connected to it. The grain was poured in, and it made its way down through the eye of the stone onto this surface here, where it was ground, and then it would filter its way out to the edge, sift its way out, and you had meal. And that's the simple operation of a grist mill. Roughly 3 miles upstream, Benjamin Walker built another sawmill supplying lumber needs to growing settlement in that area. And in 1840, he added a carding mill to his little enterprise. It was a mechanical process that disentangled, cleaned, and intermixed fibers to produce a continuous web of wool suitable for subsequent processing, satisfying the needs for the weaving of clothing and bedding and many other things. You've all seen a spinning wheel, right? And you have the wool that's hooked onto it, and in comes through the spinning wheel. To get to that point, this is a carding machine. Again, your water source would turn the wheel. The wool in its raw form would be fed in here, and then it would be pulled through these series of wheels. And they had different functions. And when it was done, you had little balls to weave with. These wheels were made in the United States. The burr stones for the grinding of grain, those were made in England at $1,500 a pop. That's a lot of money today, and you think a lot of money that many years ago. So it was quite an investment, but the return on investment was immense. They didn't wear out. Capitalizing on the proximity of the carding machine, John Purcell established a woolen factory to manufacture and sell woolen products. With the coming of steam-operated mills, which could be located wherever the owners chose, the old water-powered mills were dismantled and allowed to fall into ruins. With the advancements in milling operations, originally they were dependent upon the flow of water to turn the wheel. Well, then they found out that you could take water from anywhere and boil it, and the steam could be then converted to a way to turn a wheel. So that moved the mills off of the waterways, and we had several steam-powered mills right down here at 5th and Main years ago. All of this activity brought people and the establishment of communities, none of which ever grew to any significant size. The oldest was Moonsville, laid out by Zimmery Moon in 1835. That's how old that community is. Between 1838 and 1840, there was a heightened level of activity brought about by the construction of the nearby Indiana Central Canal. It was speculated the canal would be an economic boom to the new village, but with the suspension of the canal construction, 1839-1840, Moonsville declined. Now, granted, this is from the history books. I question that statement because the distance from the canal to Moonsville is much greater than is normal canal towns, much greater. But our early historians say that Moonsville was the direct result, and the timing is right, of the fact that the Indiana Central Canal was here. But you can see the distance that it would go. I mean, it may be more logical to move the town over here. Over time, the name has been a subject of debate. Some called it Moonville, while others preferred the plural, Moonsville. The finding for the latter was decided with the discovery of the town's original plat map. On December the 19th, 1834, Nineveh Berry, who at that time was the Madison County surveyor, drew the plat for Moonsville as directed by Zimmery Moon. The recording of this plat did not take place until May 7th, 1835, over in our courthouse. The heading of the plat distinctly bears the title Town of Moonsville, thus settling the debate. Here is the original map of Moonsville as drawn by Nineveh Berry in 1835. Clearly it is a plural. And you go over to Moonsville today and it's not grown a lot since then. But I call your attention, this is Google Earth. How many of you rely on Google Earth? Pretty reliable source, wouldn't you say? They call it Moonville. Now I was looking through this and I thought, well, that debate goes on because that's clearly Moonville. Intersection at Moonville. Now, the county's got it right. Their road sign there, and then on the other side of town there. And then there's a company up there. They know it's Moonsville. Pittsboro. About 1838, the village of Pittsboro was laid out by John Beale and others on the state road. It was immediately north of present site of Prosperity. Several lots were sold, and soon after the town was laid out, as the records of the County Commissioners Court for 1839 March term show, this little area right here, just north of Prosperity, is where Pittsboro was located. It was a canal town, and Jeremiah Judd was licensed to sell groceries and liquors for the year 1839. The old settlers used to tell the fights that occurred among the canal diggers, especially upon or immediately after payday. There were several stores and residences, most of them log structures common to the period. When the canal was abandoned, most of the inhabitants moved on and Pittsboro ceased to exist. Just a little historical background for you. The state borrowed the money to build the canal system. They passed an act in 1835 appropriating $10 million to build canals and railroads and roads and so forth in Indiana. $3.5 million of that $10 million was for canal construction. And the canal construction went slowly, it was costly, and by the late 1830s, less than 5 years after the act had been passed by the state legislature, they'd already spent $18 million of the $3.5 million that was allotted to them. And they were nowhere near done. Well, the creditors who had loaned the state the money to do that, because of a financial crisis in Europe that spread to the United States, as financial crises many times do, the creditors called in the notes. The state of Indiana didn't have the money. The state of Indiana went bankrupt. And they shut the canal work completely down. So when I make reference there to canal was abandoned, that's what's going on. They ran out of money. The only part of that canal that was ever actually completed was 9 miles. And today it's owned by the Indianapolis Water Company. It's the canal that runs through downtown Indianapolis. And for their $18 million investment, the company got $220,000 when they sold that canal. Not a very good return on your investment. Immediately south of there was the intersection of County Road 500 North, and the Old State Road was another canal town. It was called Prosperity. And you see it on the map.
It's
still there. Prosperity was founded by John Beale and Hiram Lauder on the speculation that better times were ahead with the planned Indiana Central Canal construction passing nearby, hence the name Prosperity. For a time, the village flourished, which is probably responsible for the name. When the Anderson and Alexandria Turnpike was built in 1858, utilizing a portion of that old state road, a toll gate was placed there and fees were collected to defray the cost of needed road improvements. The death of the canal was a severe blow to the village. The discontinuance of the post office on August 6, 1875 added to the decline, and with the inauguration of the free gravel road system, even the toll gate was abolished. Prior to the construction of State Road 9 in the late 1830s, passenger buses used the Alexandria Pike as the main thoroughfare north out of town. I remember that as a kid. My mother put me on a Greyhound or Trailways bus downtown Anderson Friday afternoon right after school, and I'd ride that bus to Fort Wayne where my grandparents lived. They would meet the bus in Fort Wayne and I'd spend the weekend with them. Mother and Dad would drive up on Sunday morning, we'd have lunch and we'd come back. So I remember those trips, and I remember hearing this, what I'm going to tell you next. During the Great Depression and afterwards, bus drivers nearing the town would give their passengers a sense of hope by announcing, "Folks, we are now entering prosperity." And I heard them say that. I remember hearing that said. Didn't mean anything to me now, but then, but it does now. The village of Prosperity and the intersection, the only intersection, and the road for Prosperity Lake, Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant was right here. Right there. Mount Pleasant was situated in the neighborhood of the Dill and Thornburg Farm, adjoining the Jacob Bronnenberg land. It was located about where Bethany Point Health Campus on Bethany Road is located today. Also a result of the planned canal, it came too late in the days of canal fever, as the work on the canal had been abandoned in 1839, the same year that Mount Pleasant was laid out. John Thornburg built the only house there, and later on they had a little red schoolhouse named Thornburg. College Corner. College Corner is here. Here. Finally, the area at the intersection of County Road 400 North and County Road 100 East acquired the name College Corner, where a one-room schoolhouse was built on the southeast corner in 1884. Presumably, it was named in recognition of a place of learning. It eventually would become one of 3 one-room schoolhouses in Madison County, all called College Corner. There's the one in Richland Township, which still stands. There's one in Boone Township that still stands. And there's one in Duck Creek Township that no longer stands. The one in Boone Township still stands, but it is in a state of collapse, as is the one in Richland Township. But yeah, we had 3 schoolhouses here by that same name. I believe the College Corner, this one was opened in 1950 to replace that one. The one that I'm talking about being replaced is in this wooded area. And there it is. And every time I get around something like this, where I have a keep out, I forget how to read.
Me too.
Works every time. Works every time.
I didn't see that.
Works every time. I've been in it, as I just admitted to, and there is a blackboard on the wall, and fallen timbers and so forth. I have a thing for the old schoolhouses, as some of you know. The replacement in 1950, one-room schoolhouses. In Richland Township is the Burton School. It's officially, all had official names. The official name was District School Number 7 for this one. Each one had an official name, but then they had the common names that all of the children and everybody in the neighborhood knew them by. The Burton School is at 410 East, 450 North, and it is a private residence today. We just showed you the College Corner School. And this is District School Number 6. It's the Connor School. It's on 350 North. I've got a photograph. It's not in this presentation, but I have a photograph taken inside the building. And it's classes or schools in session. And there are 8 rows of seats. 8 rows of seats. First grade, second grade, third grade, etc. Okay? And there's one teacher. And I have a friend who didn't attend that school, but he attended one laid out just like it. And the teacher, the first thing of the morning, she'd start with the first graders, and she'd get them going. She'd go to the second graders. First graders start doing homework. She'd work her way across the room. When she got done with the 8th grade, she'd come back to check on the first grade. That was her day. I said to him, was it hard to concentrate if you're sitting there and she's talking to all these other kids? And he said, yes, it was. And I said, what'd you do? And he said, I didn't look up. Indiana Central Canal. As you can see, it's had quite an impact on Richland Township. The Indiana Central Canal, as I gave you the background on it, in Madison County, work was done in several places. In 1840, when the canal project was done away with, they asked, the state legislature asked for all the canal work gangs to submit a report. You see, the canal was not done by one company. In northern Indiana, I have found 87 different companies that built canals. 87 different companies, and they would contract for a section, and they would build that section. When they got that done, they then would try to be contracted for another section. The idea that the surveyors had laid it all out so all that would connect was the concept. But when the work was stopped because of the money dried up, the legislature asked for a report, and they called it the completion report of 1840, and I've seen it, for Madison County. And in Madison County, there were 10 miles of planned canal construction. 5 were completed, so half of the work was done in Madison County. 4 of those 5 miles that were done were all done beginning at 800 North, paralleling State Road 9 down through Richland Township to Prosperity Lake, and then a little bit below it. And I'll show you some of that. Went by there yesterday, and it doesn't look like this anymore. Trees are all growing up, so you can't even see it. I'm standing on 800 North. I'm just a slight, short distance east of State Road 9. Maybe a couple stone's throw is all I am. And I'm looking south, and this is all grown up. In the wintertime, it was all dead, and you could actually see the canal prism here, and it flows just straight as a dime. At 600 North, you get this, and well, all this is not canal water, it's drainage. The people, the farmers and so forth who live along the old canal now have tiled their ground over there for drainage purposes. That was a problem with canal construction in Indiana because it was in the north in the wintertime. What do you do when the water freezes? Can't use the canal. So it was a problem for usage, and finally the farmers just decided that they would use it as a drainage. Another picture from the Daly's former property. Bob did a nice job of mowing, or she did. I don't know.
I did not know that.
You did mow that part, okay. That same time period that I was invited there, I was invited to another gentleman's property down on 100 East below Prosperity. Dale Cook, thank you. The answer is no, I couldn't recall his name, but Dale called me, and he called members of the Indiana Canal Society to meet at his property. He wanted us to see his property. And so 3 or 4 members of the Indiana Canal Society, some from Fort Wayne, some from Indianapolis, and myself, we all met there, and we took a tour of his property. And this is a photograph that I took. We're on the canal towpath. You see those canal boats, the water didn't flow through the canal, it was stagnant water. So they had to be pulled by animals, hooked to the front of the canal boat, and the animals, of course, walked on the towpath, which was immediately beside the water. And so we're standing on the towpath, and I'm shooting down. You can see how deep that is. Now, what the canal diggers did here was, that's natural terrain, so they built this side up to make the other side of the canal half the digging. You follow what I'm saying? And so they did that wherever they had the opportunity to do that. So that's the canal, as the Canal Society people call it, the canal prism. I call it the bed of the canal, but they call it the prism. And now we're down in that prism. And we're now up on the towpath, and you can see it here. Ideally, a canal, when it was constructed, if there was no natural terrain, you would have the berm side, which is the side away from the water. It was 8 feet wide at the top, and the berm, or the towpath, was 10 feet wide to allow for 2 oxen or 2 whatever to pull the canal boat. And the canal would be here. And any of you ever been to Metamora? And that canal boat down there is pulled by horses, if I remember right. Same concept, same concept. And there it is again. You can see clearly laid out. Over here, just out of sight, is Little Killbuck Creek, which is the water source for whatever the gentleman was that mentioned that. That would have been the water source for the canal. I'm going to conclude today's program with the traditional closing. I like to recognize the pioneer cemeteries in each township. Some townships have many more cemeteries than do others, but this is Richland Township. And Melody, I'm going to give you the opportunity to just interject comments if you have any, okay? You'll see why I'm asking her. The purpose of the Madison County Cemetery Commission is to restore and preserve the early cemeteries in Madison County. The following photographs and descriptions of the known pioneer cemeteries in Richland Township are from the website Pioneer Cemeteries and Their Stories, Madison County, Indiana. The website was produced and written by Melody Hull for the Cemetery Commission, of which she is a member. She and her husband created this site. And I'm telling you what, of all the internet sites in the world, this is the #1 site. If you like history, if you want to know about our past, this is the #1 site on the internet. And Melody is the creator of it. And it's with grateful appreciation that I acknowledge her efforts in providing the information that now follows. This is her information. Broadbent, Hartman, Hartwell, Hill Farm Cemetery. The reason for the numerous names are numerous families who occupy these cemeteries. These are all pioneer cemeteries, which means in Indiana, the pioneer period for Indiana ended in 1850. After 1850, we had the introduction of the railroads, and the pioneer era was over. So that means that these pioneer cemeteries naturally contain graves that have pioneers buried in them. The location of that one I just mentioned. The earliest known date of death in this one is September 4th, 1842. I phrase it that way because a lot of these cemeteries, and you probably know it too if you've walked the cemeteries, you can't read the stones anymore on a lot of them. They're faded away. So these are dates where the date can still be read. The Madison County Historical Society undertook a project a number of years ago to send out our members to the cemeteries and record a lot of these dates on little index cards. And the last time I saw them, they're on file up in the Indiana room at the public library. Just one of the many benefits of having an active historical society. This is the Crone Peniston Cemetery. There's its location. Oldest date in there is February 23rd, 1861. This is the Curtis Cemetery. Its location, oldest date there is August 11th, 1838. The Funk Smith Cemetery. This is the Holston Cemetery. Its location, April 23rd, 1845. Melody, how many pioneer cemeteries do we have in Madison County?
At this point, roughly 96 or 7.
Yeah.
We used to have 123.
Yeah.
That's how many have been destroyed in previous decades before the 1973 law that said you can't do that anymore. You can't even build within 100 feet of one of these cemeteries. You can't disturb the stones or the graves or the fencing that the township trustee may have put up. You're breaking the law now. Oh yeah, that's the one in Moonsville. The
Joan?
Haggy, Weems, blah, blah, blah. It hasn't, yeah.
There's its location, October 3rd, 1840. Moonsville Cemetery, March 1, 1843. The Nelson Cemetery, July 2nd, 1833. Wesley Cemetery, Forest Chapel. Its location, July 25th, 1851. And with that, we are done for today.